Hey, John Gilroy here. Years ago, there was a comedy routine when something like who's on first and what's on second. Today, we're going to ask the question, what's on your network? Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. Our guest today is Tom Guarente. He's Vice President, External and Government Affairs at a company called Armis, A-R-M-I-S. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, John.
You're just a young puppy. You probably don't remember that comedy routine from years ago, but I think the federal government should be asking themselves, well, yeah, we got to do zero trust. We got who's on our network? What's on our network, huh?
That's exactly right. That's the $64 million question.
Yeah, another old TV show. Hey, we'll do a TV show podcast instead of a technology podcast. So Armis, I go to trade shows all the time. Sometimes I hear about Armis, but I really don't. Maybe for the benefit of the listeners out there, maybe define what Armis is all about and what your value proposition is, please.
Absolutely. So Armis, and thanks for that question. Armis really handles the most fundamental question that then leads to how do we go down the zero trust path and how do we protect our environment? And it's all about what is in my environment, where do my vulnerabilities lie, and in the end, what is my cyber exposure? It's hard to answer that if you don't know what exists within your environment.
Right. And everyone's talking about zero trust and identity and assets and data. Well, wait a minute. Who's there before you? Maybe step one is who's on your asset? Because, if you look at a microcosm, what's going on in the federal government today, you got on-prem, you got different endpoints, you got people with mobile, you got OT, by the way, operational technology. Let me see, data centers, cloud, Tom's computer's backyard. They're everywhere, aren't they?
Yep, that's exactly right. And John, if I'm putting an alarm system on my home, it would be really good for me to know how many doors and windows I have.
Good idea, huh?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I am a history buff, and I've read all kinds of history about Spain and about Portugal. And in 1493, they come up with this Treaty of Tordesillas, if you remember, and they split the world in two. They just arbitrarily had this big map, and they mapped it out. And I don't want to talk about the map of the world. I want to talk about an asset map. And so best practice here is if you have a network, whether it's a federal network or the network for Tom's Donuts, what you want to do is list out all your assets. And this is a point of the discussion here today. What Armis can do is can help a federal leader map out exactly what assets they have in my donut so they know what to give permissions for. Is that the first step?
That's exactly right.
So, Tom, what is an asset map?
So an asset map, essentially, John, is something that you can look at in real time and understand what exists within your environment. And environments today, as you know, are hybrid environments. It isn't just items that are within a physical location. We have cloud, we have distance assets. So being able to look at all of that is the first step. And then understanding the behaviors of all of those assets is just as important.
Yeah, when I think of assets, I think of watching the news at night, and a military guy will go on and say, well, we have assets in Syria. We have assets here and there. And so assets, kind of a malleable word, means many different things. In the software community, it means usually something that's produced by the software. So in your world, what is an asset?
Yeah, so it would be a physical asset. It could be a software asset, right? Any of the above. It really is an understanding, and particularly in our environment today, right? Do I have these types of devices? And by the way, do those devices have a Chinese chipset in them? Do those devices have an updated operating system, right? Understanding at a very complex and complete level of depth what exists within each asset.
Great. Earlier, you mentioned an asset, and trippingly on the tongue, you talked about context. And I think this is really important. I mean, if you have something that's out of place, it can make all the difference in the world.
Right.
And I think when you're looking at thousands, hundreds of thousands of different assets everywhere, this whole idea of putting it in perspective, or putting it on the map, maybe that's what you'd say.
Yes.
And so context is important, isn't it?
That's right. It's really important. Understanding what you have, where it exists, if it is behaving in a way that it should behave, or are there anomalies that exist in the behaviors of those assets and the interdependency of those assets. That's how I really know if I'm exposed and if I really have vulnerabilities that need to be addressed.
Yeah, interdependency, that's really key. So Armis must differentiate itself by being able to make more detailed observations than other companies get when it comes to listing assets. Is that true?
That's exactly right. And the point you made earlier about the attack surface in general and assets that are out there, there is a convergence of technologies between IT, IoT, and OT. What agencies have done in the past is they have purchased specific cybersecurity solutions for each of those silos. Armis is attacking the larger problem, which is how do we look at all of it, not in a silo, but in a holistic way, so we can then understand where television cameras are within an environment that might exist, or security cameras or building access systems, and whether or not they are doing and behaving in a way that they were intended to behave.
And some of these systems, IoT or OT, maybe they were installed 20 years ago with not even thought of any computer security. Or what about Gilroy Technology comes up with some sensor, and then I go out of business.
Yep, that's exactly right.
I can't update it. And so all of a sudden, you're expected to know what exactly it is and what the status is on that. This gets to be a tough problem.
It does. It does. It's more and more complex. And the emergence of these new types of technologies, combined with the older legacy technologies that you just highlighted, it really brings a level of complexity to any environment that we didn't see 5 or 10 years ago. So teams now need more efficient workflows. They need platforms that allow them to do that. And they need a way to be more effective.
Well, here it is, December. People talk about the holidays and everyone's making predictions, sports predictions, all kinds of predictions. So I think people who are listening to this, they can go to armis.com and you have some predictions there. Is that right?
We do. We have some 2025 predictions. We have some white papers out there. There's some great information out there that will allow security professionals and business stakeholders to look at cybersecurity not just as a priority, but actually as an imperative and a necessity. And so we want to give them the tools and the information that they need to ask the right questions of their teams.
And Tom, I'll put that in the show notes in case you're walking your dog and you're getting lost. You can go to federaltechpodcast.com and get that link and see what's going on. Lots of things going out here. Just so many predictions, so many white papers coming out. Orca just had a white paper coming out. Our friends at Akamai just had a white paper come out. All kinds of people looking at this prediction. But really, it's got to start with the bottom line of knowing what your assets are. And, because you have to worry about compliance inside the Beltway. And so this is part and parcel of that. I mean, if you have to worry about zero trust compliance or whatever compliance it is, it has to assume a certain knowledge of your assets, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to understanding how those assets are behaving and where your vulnerabilities lie. If you are able to get, in essence, real-time reporting on how your environment is aligning to the regulatory environment that you work within, it gives not just IT people and security people a snapshot, but those higher level stakeholders that need to be monitoring compliance and need to be looking at how their agency and organization is doing on a regular basis. That should not be a snapshot in time. That type of reporting is refreshing to people that need that level of comfort and trust in their security posture.
Well, they opened up this podcast with some silly story about some comedians from a long time ago. Now I have to wax serious here. I don't really want to. Podcast I listened to is Chase Cunningham. He has Dr. Zero Trust podcast. Listened to it yesterday. He's this big guy from Texas and has all kinds of fun things to say. And he was in the military for 10 years, and he used this word kinetic. When he uses this word, he gets kind of serious about it.
Sure.
Because he says, if systems aren't understood completely, you can get a ransomware attack, and malicious actors are going after hospitals and people are dying. And he quoted a fact like 82 people last year in hospitals died because of ransomware, because of attacks like this. So we can sit here and say best practice is this and talk about, predicting the World Series, but not identifying your assets can have a kinetic effect on your organization, can't it?
Without a doubt. And by the way, we saw that with the Microsoft CrowdStrike incident, which was not a bad actor, right? But instead became a cyber event that had kinetic events that followed, right? We saw what happened with people that were trying to fly and what happened with airlines. My soapbox that I get on all the time with the right policymakers and decision makers is that cybersecurity is not merely an IT issue. It is a whole of agency, whole of state, whole of nation issue. And it should be approached as an imperative and with the lens of emergency preparedness and emergency responsiveness. Because to the point that you made earlier, when there is a cyber event in a medical environment, it is a clinical event. It is not merely an IT event, and lives are at stake.
I think 5 years ago, we both were pretty comfortable going into the office, and we had to start working out of our house, and everything changed upside down. And many federal IT personnel were in a situation where they had to scale. They never dreamt of, all of a sudden 20,000 people working out of their house. Well, how do you manage that? So scale is something I think people understand. I think it's what 4 or 5 years ago now, and people are kind of backing away, but still something could happen on January 10th that's going to cause scaling. And so what about your organization, and how would you handle a situation? Does your product scale easily is the question I'm asking.
It does. First of all, implementing our product is easy because it's not intrusive. And many technologies out there need agents. Our technology is agentless and can quickly map an environment and can in real time show any changes to that environment. So when you mention scale, John, if all of a sudden we have an issue where a lot of people are going to go remote and there's a shift in the IT infrastructure, you don't have to redo an environment with platforms like ours. It will show you what is happening in real time and also show you what's online, what's offline, and where there might be an issue that you need to pay attention to.
So, Tom, in January, I'll be in the classroom and I'll stand up in front of a bunch of graduate students, explain things. And so I'm going to give my explanation of agent versus agentless. And you can jump in and say, John doesn't know what he's talking about. So it seems to me, if you have 4,000 devices on your network,
yep,
and you want to use an agent-based system, what you have to do is put a piece of software in each one of those individual items. You have to know them ahead of time.
Correct.
That way it gives you flexibility as far as controlling. Now, an agent-less system means that from a central repository, you can reach out or I don't know where you'd reach out or connect, and you'd discover or you'd be in contact with the system independent of having an agent on that system. So that gives more flexibility then. That's what you're saying.
That's right. You're listening to everything that exists within an environment, and then building a thumbprint and a profile on what all of those devices are. Not just what they are, what lies within. And again, going back to an earlier comment I made, how that asset is behaving.
Yeah. Earlier, I made this silly analogy about Tordesillas and the world map and asset map. And our world hasn't changed a whole lot in 500 years, but an asset map for an organization can be stagnant. It can change. It can change overnight. It can change without warning. I mean, the people at FEMA probably didn't have a whole lot of information about Western North Carolina a couple months back. All of a sudden, snap a finger, It has to be dynamic and change there. And what about there's a case study for you, remote assets in rural North Carolina where there's no roads. I mean, this is a case in point, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it absolutely is. Look, the things that we worry about in the cybersecurity realm are not only what's happening today, but what could happen tomorrow. So partnering with an organization that can put you in the best position to not just be resilient, but to look at and to, with somewhat of an extent, predict what might be happening so that you have a process, an efficient process to very quickly act on those threats that may exist tomorrow.
Yeah, good.
Because it's a changing world. And to your point, John, you never know what's going to happen and what impact that's going to have on the tools that you need to use.
Well, in January, we're going to have a few changes here in Washington, D.C. Might change things around. So I'm going to ask you to sit in the catbird seat and take a look out and peer into the future and say, I don't know. So 6 months, 8 months, 3 years down the road, what do you think's happening with the technology of the federal government, especially with asset management and Armis? Where's the world headed, Tom?
Well, if I had the complete answer to that, John, you and I probably wouldn't be talking today, right? I'd be on a beach somewhere. But
an island, I'd own an island, that's for
that's
sure.
Right. That's right. But I will say this. Look, there's room for optimism and hope when we think about quantum computing and we think about artificial intelligence and we look at what the federal government has already done. They have expanded the definition in many realms of what asset means, going beyond just traditional IT devices. I think now we're probably going to see an acceleration and an accelerated use of technologies to make things more streamlined, more efficient, and to leverage technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, right, to be able to help teams to be more responsive. At Armis, we monitor over 4 billion assets. There's no way that a person in a manual effort could take all of those alerts and all of those data information and turn it into something relevant. We use machine learning and AI models to do that. And I think we'll see more of that in the future with a lot of organizations and agencies.
Yeah, I did radio for many decades, so I can say the phrase that pays. And so I think you stumbled on that phrase that pays is efficiency. And if a company like Armis can document and show use cases on, look, this is the way it's traditionally been done. Here's the way our technology can help improve asset management. And this is the ROI. But this is going to be, I think, in the next couple of years, I can see that phrase come in more and more. And if you're positioned well to understand from 4 billion different assets, I mean, there's got to be some, I would imagine, a profile or some kind of indices of where attacks are coming from and what issues other people have. And they've got to be reflected in the federal government. I mean, it just is human beings, large organizations have similar problems.
That's right. Yep. Look, we're all in this together. And we've got to ask the question, how does this make me better at what I do?
Great. Well, this has been fun and serious and back to fun. So I hope we have some information that can benefit from people. The website that I mentioned earlier, I'll put in the show notes. And this has been a good conversation. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Tom Guarente. He is the Vice President, External and Government Affairs at Armis.